Okay, so ready for a deep dive. Today, we're heading straight into Nigerian politics.
Sounds intense.
It is, it is. We're looking at this security situation at the Lagos State House of Assembly. It's been all over the news, and honestly, it's raising a lot of questions.
Yeah, I've seen the headlines. What's the deal? What are we diving into specifically?
So you've probably heard the basics, right? DSS officers showing up, offices being sealed off,
Uh-huh.
a whole lot of tension swirling around. We're going to try to sift through all that noise, all the reports, and try to figure out what's actually happening.
Okay, yeah, I'm in. Let's untangle this.
So the thing is, right, this situation, it's revealing something deeper about how power works in Lagos. Like, on the surface, we've got this security incident,
Right.
but underneath, there's this whole struggle for control going on.
Wow.
And it could have consequences that go way beyond, just this one event.
I see. So it's like a ripple effect. Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay, so let's rewind back to February 17th. The Lagos State House of Assembly, their version of a parliament,
Yeah.
gets this surprise visit from the DSS, the Department of State Services.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Some of those early reports, they made it sound really dramatic. Like,
How?
they were saying the DSS, stormed the assembly.
Stormed.
Yeah, and that immediately made people think, oh, is this a power grab?
Yeah, I can see why people would jump to that conclusion, especially given Nigeria's history, right, with military rule and all that.
Exactly. People are sensitive to that. Any sign of, security forces overstepping.
Right, right. Makes sense.
But then we get a totally different story from the DSS and the Assembly Clerk.
Oh, really? What did they say?
They're saying that, actually, the DSS was invited by the Assembly to increase security, like they were asked to come.
Hold on. So it wasn't a storming. It was an invitation.
That's what they're saying. And they're claiming they received a letter, like an official letter, warning about a potential security threat.
A letter, huh? Okay, now this is getting interesting. What was this threat they were so worried about?
Okay, so to understand that, we got to go back a few weeks to when the former Speaker, Mudashiru Obasa, got impeached.
Impeached? Wow. Okay, fill me in. I don't remember all the details.
He was removed from office while he was in the U.S. back on January 13th.
Removed from office while abroad? That's bold.
It was a pretty decisive vote, too. 32 out of 40 assembly members voted to kick him out.
Whoa. That's a super clear majority, so clearly something big was going on.
Right. Impeachment. That's not a small thing. Shows that there was serious dissatisfaction with Obasa. As a leader, I mean.
Totally. But what was it about his leadership? What were the actual reasons they gave?
The specific accusations, they're still kind of unclear.
Huh, interesting.
But here's what's clear. This wasn't just some internal fight. Even President Bola Tinubu, he called the impeachment a coup.
Whoa, a coup. That's serious language.
Yeah, that tells you the level of political maneuvering that was involved here.
I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal. So the president called it a coup, but didn't his own party vote to remove Obasa?
Yeah, that's what makes it so strange. It seems like maybe there are some pretty big divisions within the ruling party, the APC.
Right, because Obasa himself is ATC too. That is pretty weird.
Yeah, and that's where this group comes in, the Governance Advisory Council, the GAC.
The GAC, okay. I know the name, but give me a quick reminder. Who are they again?
They're like a powerful group within the APC based in Lagos, and they're known for really influencing political decisions. And sources are saying the GAC is split on this whole Obasa situation.
Divided, huh? So even within the party, there's no consensus.
Nope, not at all, which tells you just how much this impeachment really shake things up.
Yeah, for sure. So let's recap. We've got a divided ruling party, a former speaker who was kind of forcefully removed, and now this weird security incident at the assembly. But where does that letter fit in, the one the DSS supposedly got?
Okay, so that letter, supposedly it warned that Obasa was planning to come back to Nigeria.
Okay.
And try to take back his position as speaker by force.
By force? Like what, he's going to barge in?
Yeah, that's what the letter supposedly said. And get this, he was supposedly going to do this on February 18th.
Wait a minute, the day after the DSS showed up?
Exactly. So basically, the assembly was like, help, we need protection. They thought Obasa was going to stage a comeback.
Yeah, that's the impression they're giving. But, when you start looking closer, things get a little murky.
Murky how?
Well, first off, think about this. Obasa, he didn't just walk away quietly after they impeached him. He filed a lawsuit.
A lawsuit?
Yeah, claimed the whole thing was illegal, demanded a speedy trial, the whole 9 yards.
So the assembly, they saw that and thought, uh-oh, he's not going down without a fight.
Right. And you got to remember the context here. This is Nigeria. Political power, personal influence, it can all get tangled up pretty quickly.
Yeah, things can escalate fast.
Exactly. And it's not exactly rare for these political disputes to spill over into, real world stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's flip it for a second. Let's say, hypothetically, this letter, it wasn't real. What if someone made this whole security threat up?
Now we're talking. That's the question, isn't it? Who benefits from dragging the DSS into this whole mess?
There are those rumors, right, about the presidency, about them wanting Obasa back. Could this be their way to make that happen, like orchestrate his return? Maybe even if the current assembly leadership doesn't want it.
It's a possibility. Remember, President Tinubu, he publicly slammed the impeachment, called it a coup, right? If he really does want Obasa back in the game, having the DSS there to, ensure his safe return, that could be a way to do it without looking like he's interfering directly.
But wouldn't that make the president look weak? Why risk that?
It's all about strategy, letting Obasa come back, resign gracefully, give him what some people are calling a soft landing. It lets him save face, avoids a messy legal battle that could hurt the APC even more.
So it's damage control, basically. Keep the party together, even if it means swallowing your pride and letting someone you condemned back into a position of power.
Exactly. Plus, remember the GAC, that powerful group within the APC, they're split on Obasa. Bringing him back could be a way for Tinubu to smooth things over with the pro-Obasa faction and avoid a bigger rift in the party.
Okay, so that explains the presidency's potential motives. But what about the people within the assembly itself? Could someone be, I don't know, working behind the scenes, maybe even against the speaker's interests?
Oh, absolutely. Don't forget, the assembly is full of individuals, each with their own goals and loyalties. If that letter to the DSS was forged, it means there's some serious internal power struggles going on, stuff that goes way beyond just Obasa.
So maybe some members are trying to climb the ladder, so to speak, aiming for the speaker's seat themselves.
Could be. Politics is all about strategy and opportunity. A crisis like this, that's an opening for ambitious people to make their move.
And we can't forget about the opposition either. Gbadebo Rhodes-Vivour, the guy who ran against the current governor back in 23, he's been pretty vocal about all this, calling it an attack on democracy, even comparing it to stuff that happened during military rule.
Right. Rhodes-Vivour's criticism adds a whole other layer to this. He's basically saying this isn't just some internal political fight. It's a threat to how democracy works in Nigeria. And that message, it's hitting home with people who are already worried about the government and what the future holds.
So we've got the ruling party maybe pulling strengths for their own gain, assembly members potentially going behind their own leaders' back, and the opposition calling it a threat to democracy itself. This is a lot to unpack.
It really shows how one event can have these huge implications. It's not just about a letter or who sent some security forces where. It's about power in Lagos, about the integrity of their institution, about what direction Nigerian politics are headed.
Okay, let's try to break this down a bit. We've talked about motives, but we haven't really answered the main question. Was the DSS at the assembly because there was a real threat, or was there something more going on?
To get to the bottom of that, we got to look at the facts. We know they got a letter, supposedly from the assembly, asking for more security, and we know the DSS responded by sending people sealing off offices, all that.
But the Speaker's office says they didn't know anything about the letter, so who knows if it was even real. And even if it was, did the DSS overstep? Did they do more than they needed to? Maybe because someone with a different agenda told them to?
Those are the million-dollar questions. And honestly, we don't have all the answers yet, but we can look at the different scenarios. Try to figure out what might have happened.
Okay, let's put on our detective hats. What are the possibilities here?
All right, scenario one. The letter was real. The assembly leadership, including Speaker Meranda, they were genuinely scared Obasa was going to try to force his way back in. So the DSS being there, that was them being proactive, a show of force to prevent any trouble.
But then why would the Speaker's office deny they had anything to do with it? Could it be like a strategy to distance themselves from the DSS so they don't look weak or like they can't handle things themselves?
Makes sense. They might be trying to protect their image, especially with all the criticism coming from the opposition. Remember, politics is all about perception. Getting too cozy with the security forces, that can backfire, even if you think they're doing the right thing.
Okay, what about option number 2? What if someone faked the letter, like a group within the assembly who wanted to get the DSS involved for their own reasons?
Now, things get juicy. If that's the case, who in the assembly had something to gain from that, and why?
Well, if those rumors about the presidency wanting Obasa back are true, maybe some of his supporters in the assembly cooked this whole thing up to make sure he came back safe, even if it meant going against the speaker.
That's a risky play, but not impossible. If they were convinced Obasa was coming back no matter what, setting things up so the DSS was already there to keep things under control, it could be a way to manage the situation and make sure it didn't turn into chaos.
But wouldn't that mean there's a huge rift within the assembly itself, like members working against their own leadership?
Absolutely. A fake letter, that's a sign of major internal power struggles, people willing to manipulate the system for their own gain. It raises some serious red flags about how the assembly operates, about whether they're actually following the rules.
So we've got one scenario where the DSS was invited by the assembly, even if it was maybe a bad call, and another where a rogue group within the assembly set the whole thing up, maybe even working with the presidency. What's the third possibility?
Scenario 3. The letter was real. But the DSS saw it as a chance to, throw their weight around.
Ah, the classic power grab. So even if the assembly really was asking for help, the DSS might have used it as an excuse to get more involved in politics than they should be.
Exactly. Maybe they exaggerated the threat from Obasa, or maybe it's all made up, all just to justify a more aggressive response. You got to remember, security forces, they operate in the shadows. It's not always clear what their true motives are.
And that's what's scary about this scenario. It suggests the DSS might be acting on their own, or maybe even working with certain politicians to mess with the democratic process.
It also makes you wonder, if they can do this in Lagos, what's stopping them from doing it in other states? Or even at the national level?
That's a chilling thought, and it brings us back to those bigger issues we talked about, the erosion of trust in institutions, the fragility of democracy. We got to be vigilant, constantly watching out for people who abuse their power.
Right, we can't just assume everything's fine. Yeah, it's a wake-up call, you know?
Mhm.
It shows we can't just accept what we're told, especially when it comes to people in power. We got to keep asking questions, challenge what we think we know, and look at things from different angles.
What worries me is, like, what does this whole thing do to how people see things? If they lose faith in the assembly, in the DSS, even in democracy itself, that's a problem.
It is. Trust is like the bedrock of a democracy, right? When people start thinking the system is rigged, that elections don't matter, that the people in charge only care about themselves, that's when things get really unstable.
That's what's so interesting about Rhodes-Vivour, you know? He's tapping into that feeling, that anxiety. He's making this incident about something bigger, about democracy eroding.
And that message, it's resonating with people, especially those who are already wary of the government, unsure about what the future holds.
It's a smart move, honestly, but it also shows how important it is to have these conversations. Out in the open.
Exactly. Debate and even disagreements, those are crucial in a democracy. That's how we hold people accountable, how we prevent them from abusing their power. When you silence dissent, when institutions become these black boxes, that's when things go sideways.
So we've gone deep on this Lagos Assembly thing. What's the big takeaway for our listeners? What should they keep in mind as this story unfolds?
I think it's this. Focus on the details, but don't get lost in them. This isn't just about a he said, she said, who wrote, what kind of thing. It's about the power dynamics at play and what this could mean for democracy in Nigeria.
It's a reminder that power is constantly shifting, and even something that seems small can have huge consequences, way beyond the people directly involved.
Keep an eye on Lagos. This isn't over. What happens next, the decisions those in power make, that's going to shape things for a long time. The stakes are high. The future of Nigerian democracy is, in a way, hanging in the balance.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll keep you updated. And until next time, keep asking those tough questions. Keep digging deeper. TOCCR.